We're going to write a PHP script to automatically back up our MySQL database using Windows Task Scheduler. I have a database called test. It's a table called people with 3 records of people and some information about those people. In my project, I have in my htdocs MySQL backup folder with a file called autobackup.php. This is where we're going to write our script that will automatically run when we create our task in Task Scheduler. In VS Code, here's what we have. So let's start writing our script. The first thing we need to do is list our databases, the databases that we're going to be backing up. We're going to store this in an array, so we'll just say databases. And I only have one database that I'm going to be backing up, so in this case, I'm just going to say test. Next, we need to specify the username for the database. And next, we need to specify the password. I'll just call it pass. And we need to set the host. In this case, it's going to be localhost. I cannot spell today. And you don't have to do this, but I'm going to do this manually anyway. I'm going to manually specify the time zone. This can be set in the PHP any, but I'm going to do it here just to make sure that it's set to what I want. And I'm going to be using the time, date, and timestamp inside of the name of the files that we back up. So that's why I'm going to have that there. The next thing I want to do is check that the place that we're going to be backing up exists. So you could back up to your server itself, but I wouldn't recommend it. Instead, I'm going to be backing up to a databases folder here, which will store my backups. But what I'm going to do is delete it first to show you how we're going to check that it exists. So we're going to say file exists. If it doesn't exist, then we're going to create the directory or the folder. And this is going to be located in C, users, documents, and databases. And I know I'm going to need that. So if this folder does not exist, we're going to mkdir, and we're simply going to make it and make sure that we have no problems working with that. The next thing we need to do is loop through our databases array and back up all of our databases. So we're going to say for each databases as database. And the first thing we want to do is, well, the first thing I'm going to need to do is check that the folder for the databases exists. So we know I'm going to be backing up to a folder called databases, but inside of databases, I'm going to have all of my databases organized by the database name. So inside of databases, there's going to be a folder called test, and inside of test, it's going to have all of the backups for test. If I had another database, it'll have its own folder and all of its own backups organized. So for me, I'm going to make sure that those folders exist. So if file does not exist, in this case, we're saying, we're going to specify database. So the name of the database here. If this does not exist, then again, we need to make it so that we can work in it. mkdir. Now we need to specify how we want to name our files. So I'll say file name, and you can do this any kind of way you want. How I'm going to do it is I'm going to print the name of the database. So database, which is the name of the database, and we're going to do a underscore, and we're going to add the date. So date, And the format that I'm going to be using is the capital F. I'm going to use lowercase d and uppercase y. And we're going to add an @ and next to that @ we're going to add date. This is going to put our timestamp, and we're going to be using the lowercase GIA. That is going to give us our timestamp. And I am going to specify a unique ID with a underscore prefix and no entropy. And this will give us our file name. And now we need to specify where we're going to store the file. And in this case, it's going to be C users documents databases. We specify the database name itself, and lastly the file name .SQL. And so we've created the file name how we want. It's going to be the name of the database, the date, which is going to be month, date, year, at the timestamp with the unique identifier prefixed with an underscore, and you'll see what that looks like. And we're going to be saving it in users, documents, databases, the database name, and the file name SQL. We could just put SQL there, but whatever. And lastly, we need to execute the backup command. And for this, what we need to be using is the MySQL dump executable, which you need to find in your MySQL folder. In my case, I'm using the example, so it's going to be under MySQL bin. And you want to search for MySQL dump to make sure that you have it. mysqldump.exe. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to locate that executable. Inside of bin, MySQL dump. You don't need to specify .exe here. And now we need to specify, because we're going to be logging into the database here with these credentials and running the command to dump the data, well, not dump it like delete it, but download all of its information and saving it as a SQL file. So we're going to say user, and we're going to be using the curly braces user variable or variables. And we're going to specify the password, which is going to be equal to, and let me make sure I put the equal there. And we'll say pass. And then we need to specify the host and the database. And that's going to be equal to host. And then we need to specify the database. And lastly, we're going to make sure we put out for the file. So we say results file is going to be equal to, and curly braces again, file name, or not file name, folder, sorry. And then we can, if we want, we can specify the output. And I might just do that by doing print our output like that. That should give us information about our script. Now, if we did this correctly, we should see a databases folder here. Let's run this using the debugger here. And with no errors, we see a folder has been created in our documents folder called databases with a folder called test. And inside of test, you can see our first backup of our database. And if we open that up in our text editor, we can see the information for our people's table for our test database. And now we need to create a task scheduler task. So we're going to just say task scheduler, open that up, and we're simply going to create our task. So what we want to do is click on create task, and we'll give it a name. I'll call it MySQL backup. And we have some options under general, whether we want to run it when the user logs on or whether we want to run it when the user is logged in or not. I want this to run as if it was running on a server, so whether a user is logged in or not. Run with the highest privileges. I don't think that's necessary, but you can activate that. I'm going to set configure for Windows 10. I will run with highest privileges just to make sure that everything runs smoothly. Trigger. So what is going to trigger this script, this task to run? Well, we can do on idle, we can set a schedule on an event. I'm going to have it set at startup. And we could put a delay. I like to put a delay here in case, because if we're backing up over a network, we want to make sure that our Wi-Fi or our internet connection sets up properly. So we could do it for a minute or 30 seconds, but in this demonstration, I'll just turn it off because I don't want to wait for this tutorial. But usually I like to have a delay just to make sure our internet is on. We can repeat the task every hour of the day. I'll say infinitely. We can stop all running tasks at the end of repetition duration. Well, don't need that. We don't need this. I'm going to enable, and that's good for the trigger. So this will run when the system starts up. And what are we actually doing? Well, we're going to be running a program, starting a program. We're going to be running a PHP script. So how do we tell Windows this? Well, under our program script box, we need to find PHP because that's what that's the program we're going to be running. So we're going to go to examp, PHP, and we're going to look for the php.exe, and we're going to pass it some arguments. -f in the location of our script. In this case, examp htdocs, MySQL backup, auto backup, and that is this path and auto backup.php. So again, PHP executable -f and the location of the script. We'll click OK. Conditions is fine. Other settings is fine. We can uncheck stop tasks longer than 3 days. And this is good. So I'll click OK on this, and then it asks for a password. You must specify a password, and once that's done, your task is created. I don't see it. There it is. So the MySQL task is set. We will run this script by restarting our computer. Now, when we look in our databases folder, in our documents folder, we should see that it exists. Our databases folder exists, our test folder exists, and we have our first automatic backup. And that is how you create automatic scheduled MySQL backups in PHP using Windows Scheduler.